Over the last 2,500 years, Buddhism has grown out of the teachings of a single individual, Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, who through profound meditation recognized the existence of a set of universal truths. Judaism has also evolved over the millennia. However, Jewish tradition is rooted in the collective history of its people and their relationship to a single, enigmatic, and invisible God, as recounted in the Torah. While Buddhism spread through Asia and over the centuries adapted itself to suit local cultural traditions, Judaism was also changing. Jews were expelled from the Promised Land of Israel in the year 70 and forced to practice their religion in exile for nearly 2,000 years. Despite the various interpretations of his basic philosophy, the essential message of the Buddha, stressing the primacy of reflection, intention, and mindfulness in transcending human suffering, remains the foundation of Buddhism as it is practiced throughout the world today. In the diaspora, Jews traveled to many lands, but maintained their traditions through ritual observance and continued study of the Torah. For thousands of years, Jews and Buddhists had little, if any, knowledge of one another. But in this century, social forces and historical circumstance have brought these two ancient traditions together in the New World and allowed them to communicate in ways that would have previously been unimaginable.
Now, here is Edward R. Murrow.
Good evening. Tonight's Small World unites two statesmen and scholars who are also old friends. From Jerusalem, Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion. And from Burma, we are picking him up from Hong Kong, former Prime Minister U Nu of Burma. Prime Minister Ben-Gurion, there's an open circuit to Hong Kong, if you would like to say shalom.
Shalom, Mr. Onu.
Shalom, Mr. Ben-Gurion.
Oh, you hear me?
Yes.
How are you?
Yes, thank you. I'm quite well.
How's your wife? Is she with you?
Oh, thank you very much. She's fine, too. How is Mrs. Ben-Gurion?
Oh, fine. Thanks.
Prime Minister Ben-Gurion,
yes?
When we were with you at your kibbutz several years ago, you spoke at length about Judaism and Buddhism, and you pointed out the similarities between the two. But I have the feeling that U Nu does not entirely agree with you.
It is similar and different. It's similar in that respect that Buddhism wants people to live in peace, love each other, help each other, and to draw away hatred.
Yes.
And this is almost the same what you said in our Torah, that you should love your fellow men like yourself.
Yes. Yes.
Buddhism is now the fastest growing Eastern religion in America. Nearly 1 million Americans from a range of religious backgrounds now practice Buddhism. Asian immigrants transported Buddhism to America during the past 100 years and continued to practice it in their new home. Now, however, a new, more distinctively Western Buddhism has emerged, which translates the teachings of the various schools of Buddhism for its predominantly non-Asian followers. Jews, who make up 2% of the population, account for an estimated 30% of non-Asian American Buddhists, many of whom are among the leading expositors and scholars of Buddhism in America. The striking resonance between Buddhism and Judaism has been remarked upon by writers and scholars and generated a number of notable books and articles. Perhaps more significantly, traditional Jewish practices are being modified in synagogues and among individuals seeking to incorporate the teachings of Buddhism into their spiritual lives. Leaders of the Jewish community met with the 14th Dalai Lama, the spiritual leader of Tibet, in New Jersey in 1989 and again in Dharamsala, India in 1990. These meetings were organized by Mark Lieberman, a San Francisco Bay Area eye surgeon. Lieberman has studied Orthodox Judaism and Theravada Buddhism and has helped establish a Thai Buddhist meditation monastery in California for Western-born monks and nuns.
The embryonic origin of the meeting was an obsessional dialogue in my mind that I couldn't resolve year after year after year of intensive meditation practice. I was profoundly drawn to all these ancient memories of my childhood and so forth, and yet I also found that this clarity of this Buddhist teaching and practice was the most profound spiritual experience I'd had in my life. And so there was this constant dialogue. Who am I? Am I Jewish? Am I Buddhist? I couldn't make headway of it, but it seemed like I didn't want to repudiate either part of me.
All of us alive and sustained us and brought us together at this moment together. It is a wonderful privilege to be here. Today is really the first time that Jews and Buddhists can talk and share together. And at a level of personal transformation, there are many of us who are very, very proud of our Jewish roots and very proud of our Buddhist wings. So we are very grateful for Your Holiness to be here with us.
Although this was the first time the Dalai Lama had participated in formal dialogue with Jewish leaders, he was keenly aware of the profound historical resonance between Jews and Tibetan Buddhists.
The Dalai Lama reaches safety on Indian soil.
In 1950, the Chinese army invaded Tibet and began the systematic destruction of Tibetan Buddhist culture. For the last 40 years, the Dalai Lama and over 100,000 Tibetans have lived in exile.
Presently, we are passing through a very, very difficult period, and there is every danger to disappear Tibetan culture from this planet. Now, right from the beginning, when we become refugees, we always talk, the Jewish people, so many centuries, and scattered many places. It's a different continent, it's a different country, different culture. Yet, they keep the Jewish tradition. So you see, we often talk, we have to learn the difficult experiences from our Jewish brothers and sisters. Mm-hmm. And you may have some secret technique to keep these things. So that secret thing you want to know. Then we know quite clearly the Jewish people, how much suffering in the past, in particular this century, and Holocaust during this period. So naturally, you see, different people from, the same kind of atrocity, same kind of unfortunate, dark, experiences. Then naturally we develop some kind of special closeness. So, thank you.
He was saying, we love you, we admire you. And this is not something that Jews are used to when they interact with other religious groups. It simply doesn't happen very often in the Western world. The half a day, of course, was too short to get much substance going, but it was perfect from my point of view. His Holiness was really intrigued by some answers all too brief about his questions about Jewish mysticism and the meaning of God and so forth. So he wanted to talk more. He wanted the dialogue to continue. It couldn't have been a more auspicious beginning.
In 1990, Mark assembled a group of leading Jewish thinkers from the United States and Israel and brought them to Dharamsala, the capital and cultural center of the exiled Tibetan Buddhist community.
We had a year to prepare. We were able to sort of choose those teachers who were able to best reach and best listen to the Dalai Lama's answers. I did want a dialogue rather than a Jewish monologue.
Not only did we learn so much about a tradition, a people, a history, a religion, but I learned so much about my own tradition, my own religion, my own culture, my own people, and myself. That's what you hope for in dialogue, that you will come out of the experience not only with more knowledge, but changed, transformed, if you will. And that happened.
I think we also come with a sense of love. One of the most powerful themes in the Bible is that we never forgot we were slaves in Egypt. Whenever we see a slave, we ought to feel a special extra measure of compassion because we know in our own flesh what it feels like. So we came feeling a real sense of identification with you and your people at this moment.
You lost your country 30 years ago to a powerful neighbor. And now, you must find ways to preserve your religion as you live in exile, just as we did.
The 2 weeks in Dharamsala were a powerful personal experience for the participants. But while much of the dialogue focused on the crisis facing the exiled Tibetan Buddhist community, the Jewish delegation had to confront its own internal conflicts.
The relationships among the Jews was quite difficult and sometimes even painful. One would have thought that at a distance of 5,000–10,000 miles from our homes that issues would have faded into the background, but profound differences did come up around our different understandings of the nature of Judaism. What happened in many ways was a microcosm of the larger Jewish world. There was no resolution to it.
While the diverse Jewish delegation struggled to present a coherent articulation of Judaism for the Dalai Lama, they also came face to face with a number of Jewish-born Buddhists in Dharamsala. For many in the delegation, these were Judaism's lost children, representing their fears that Judaism is losing its hold on contemporary Jews.
I want to share with you some reflections on the Jewish experience of the modern world. And that experience has been full of great joy and sadness. Joy because the modern world has brought us greater dignity, material dignity, physical dignity, political dignity. But our integration in the modern world has also brought us great trouble, great pain and confusion. We've learned the wisdom of the modern world. The modern world in many ways could not be understood without Jewish participation. Einstein, Freud, etc. But in this process we also have lost access of our ancient wisdom. In identifying with the modern world and modern cultures, often our identity as Jews has weakened. Many Jews born of Jewish families no longer consider themselves Jewish, certainly not in a significant way. And that, for those who still feel themselves to be members of the Jewish family, is a tragedy.
I think what's true for Jews at this time in history is, first of all, it's been a particularly difficult century for being a Jew. First of all, being transplanted from Europe into a new country. The real emphasis that people felt on assimilating themselves so that they could thrive in this new environment, often at the expense of a connection to their spiritual practice.
So I grew up in Los Angeles. My parents were both immigrants. My father came from Romania around the turn of the century. My mother came out of Odessa, Russia, during the pogroms. She was smuggled out as a small baby with a rag in her mouth under hay bales in the back of a cart. You know, it's funny, in asking my relatives and my parents about our family history, they say, "What do you want to know that stuff? We're trying to forget." They wanted to forget not only where they had come from, but their Judaism as well. For them, Judaism was more of a burden in terms of anti-Semitism than it was something that they wanted to preserve.
Before the pogroms and then the Holocaust, the heart of Judaism was in Europe, beating in Europe. Interestingly, as that heart tragically stopped, it then immediately started again in America. But it's sort of like a jump start. And then American Jews had to find themselves.
Jewish life in America after the Holocaust was dedicated to establishing a new Jewish community, an identity, through support of Israel and assimilation into post-war American culture.
Oh yes, sincerely, 'cause I love you so dearly.
Hi.
Sammy, what are you getting Rosie for her birthday?
I got her the complete works of Shelley in one volume, leather bound.
Take it back.
What's the matter?
Nothing.
It's not nothing, it's something. If you could turn Shelley back into cash, your sister would appreciate it even more.
I know why she's trying to save money.
You know when you're silent?
Well, I promised Rosie I wouldn't say anything about it because I didn't think she was serious. She wrote me a letter a couple of weeks ago at college and informed me she had to have an operation.
What?
An operation? Yes, an operation. And she didn't confide in her mother? Yes, it's appendix. She looked green all day.
Sammy, we have a right to know.
Going to call my salary doctor immediately.
Will you listen to me, please? She's not sick. She's just worried about her nose.
A nose?
Oh, no.
Yeah, she wants to have an operation on her nose.
You separated her septums?
No, Ma, she just wants to have a plastic job done on her nose.
While Jews struggled through the 1940s and 50s to find their place in America, Jewish spiritual traditions often went unnoticed in their increasingly secular lives.
I had a very positive experience with my family around Judaism. Pesach or the Shabbat dinners, I mean, they were wonderful. You know, my grandparents, there was a lot of humor, you know, a lot of joyousness. But most of the synagogues during the, 50s and 60s were devoid of a lot of spirituality. I mean, at the time, the focus was on practical needs, building the synagogues in the States, the community centers, the schools, supporting the elderly. Basically on function and structure, but not on the heart.
With the Jewish education that I and my generation received, there was a real dearth of spiritual values. I honestly don't think that my parents' generation or the teachers that we had were clued into that. I don't think it was part of their own discourse. Here we're talking about my grandparents being raised in the Depression, and then they had to go through World War II. They then find out what had happened in the Holocaust. At the same time, our parents are part of a rising tide of prosperity, and they're providing all of us with the best education they can possibly afford. Oh, I left out one other small thing. They created the State of Israel for the first time in 2,000 years. A phenomenal task was accomplished by these people, but then they handed on to us the next job, which is, okay, you're right, We didn't talk about spiritual values, but we did a good job, didn't we? If you want to talk about spiritual values, go do it. I know that those of us who were sitting on those AFOs probably had a common background in the 60s and the 70s of being raised in those heady days of social activism, and we were going to storm the gates of heaven.
Few American poets captured the public imagination as did Allen Ginsberg. Starting with the Beat movement in the 1950s, Ginsberg was a spokesman for some of the most radical social, political, and artistic movements in America over the last 40 years. He was born in Newark, New Jersey in 1926 into a family of Russian Jewish descent. Raised with little Jewish education and later describing himself as a non-theistic Jew, Ginsberg turned to Hebrew to express his deepest anguish. Kaddish, a eulogistic poem written in 1959 for Ginsberg's mother, used the structure, language, and rhythm of the Jewish prayer of mourning.
Wept, realizing how we suffered, and how death is that remedy all singers dream of. Sing, remember, prophesy, as in the Hebrew anthem or the Buddhist Book of Answers, and my own imagination of a withered leaf at dawn.
In the 1960s and 70s, Ginsberg indulged in countercultural forms of expression, ranging from psychedelic drugs to Eastern spirituality. He became increasingly drawn to Buddhism and Vipassana meditation as methods of broadening awareness and reformulating conventional notions of reality.
Homage to the gurus, Guru, Om, who taught us to breathe, to watch our minds revolve in emptiness, to follow the rise and fall of thoughts. I vow to master it all, awaken spaces endless.
His guru was the charismatic and controversial Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, a Tibetan Buddhist teacher known for his ability to attract large numbers of Westerners who felt distanced and alienated from their Judeo-Christian backgrounds.
From the Buddhist point of view, it's not so much if you write good poetry particularly, but how your thought patterns become elegant. That you see a phenomenal world as a process, stages, as a view.
Ginsberg felt that the Judaism which centered around an autocratic God and the political preoccupation with defending the State of Israel had undermined Judaism's spiritual worth. In 1962, Ginsberg made his first trip to Israel and wrote about his ambivalence in the poem Angkor Wat.
Jerusalem's hated walls. I couldn't get over to the holy side and weep where I was supposed to by history. Returning home at last, years later, as prophesied, is this the way that I'm supposed to feel?
For me, the source of my anger came from alienation, growing up where Judaism didn't do anything for me, and it should have. Why wasn't it there for me? Why didn't it give me anything that was useful?
So the essence of the difference is that Judaism affirms the existence of God and
Yes.
Buddhism denies it.
If everything is transient and impermanent, there can be no exception to it. Even the God himself cannot be an exception to this rule.
But the first commandment in the Jewish Torah is that there is one single God who is the creator of everything.
When I was younger, I always thought I was an atheist because I didn't believe in God. And part of that came from the fact that God was always made to be the guy in the sky. It becomes a being as an entity. I certainly couldn't get into praying to a thing. So I just left it that I didn't believe in God.
You read the Bible and God smote this and destroyed that, and this person sinned, so they got, a plague. This person didn't sin, but for whatever reason they got a plague. Like, there's so much of that going on.
Kinder, seine Mechale Schabbat. Jeden, wir bedachten uns in Gott sorgen. Es hat uns getroffen, ein größer Bruch. Es ist die Cholerie. Die Cholerie geht hin über alle Gassen.
It's a very angry, vengeful God. So you have to look beyond all that to get to the heart of spirituality. Whereas in Buddhism, it's like there's just none of that. It's just right there in the present moment.
I never found a place of being contemplative in the Judaism that I grew up in. So I'm Jewish, and I'm working more and more with that in terms of the singing of the sacred music and doing the cantorial music. But there's no way that I can live in a Jewish world. For me, the contemplative and the philosophical aspects of Buddhism are really rich. What it is for me is literally a quieting down. And my work is so much about stripping things down to those essentials. What is really important? What is the essential? What is that primordial element? Meditation in a contemplative space allows me to have those connections.
From my personal experience, the greatest appeal of the Buddhist communities that I encountered was always this ehipassiko. Come and find for yourself, come and check it out. It means open-handedness. You don't need to learn a special holy tongue. You don't need to train in the yeshiva for 12 years and learn how to master Talmudic discourse. You can learn basic meditation instruction, and you can walk and sit for 7 days, and you can have an experience of engaging the mind in a way that is comparable to what the Buddhist meditators have been doing for 2,500 years. Go for refuge to the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha until the supreme enlightenment is reached. And that accessibility and the fact it's not being pushed on you makes it very, very appealing.
Uno, in a recent speech, you said that part of the world's troubles and ills came from the repeated use of the word I. Uno, what do you think we should do in order to get rid of this I consciousness?
Meditate. Meditation is the only way by which we can get rid of that I. That's why when I visited Israel a few years ago, I had invited the Prime Minister to come over to Rangoon and have a little bit of meditation. He has accepted it.
For many Jews, a leaning towards Buddhism has not led to a renunciation of their Judaism. Far from being exclusive, Buddhist teaching and practice seeks to cultivate a mind which can process and assimilate the depth and complexity of a lifetime worth of experience. Likewise, Judaism has a lineage of progressive thinkers who realize the intellectual value of incorporating new ideas and ways of thinking. Rabbi Moshe ben Maimonides was born in Cordova, Spain in 1135 and lived his entire life under Islamic rule. In a time of uneasy relations between Jews and Muslims, Maimonides embraced the vibrant Islamic culture around him. He became a physician to the royal court of Egypt and studied the work of great Arabic thinkers, as well as the recently rediscovered texts of the ancient Greeks. In an attempt to build a bridge between reason and faith, Maimonides merged the rational philosophy of Aristotle with the allegorical structure of the Torah. His ability to synthesize the ideas of various cultures made him the most important Jewish thinker of the Middle Ages, but also led some of his contemporaries to call him a heretic. However, there would be others who recognized that Judaism would benefit through interaction with other cultures.
The Vilna Gaon said that when the light of creation came into the world, some of it went straight into Torah, and some of it went into the wisdoms of other world wisdoms. And he said the day will come when the light that went into these other wisdoms will come back into the light of Torah and will reveal things in Torah that could not be known until then.
Not only has Buddhism not challenged my Judaism or taken me away from my Judaism, but as it's made me more alive and happy and content and excited in my life, I'm actually more alive and excited as a Jew. The story of my life is not so much that I've come back to Judaism as I think I've woken up in it.
The Jewish Meditation Conference in 1997 was sponsored by Hakmat Halev, a Jewish renewal group which has sought to reinvigorate traditional congregational services with ritualized chanting and meditation.
The Western, including Jewish, traditions of meditation are discontinuous. They're interrupted. And sometimes we can help build that bridge to our own resources through insights from elsewhere.
We need to be engaging in meditation, which opens us to reality, which opens us to the richness of the moment and the richness of the Jewish moment. And when we do this meditation in conjunction with Jewish activities, it becomes not only Jewish meditation, but something which reclaims Judaism for us. So I have here at my synagogue 4 times a week, we meditate before davening. That's, to me, Jewish meditation. Even though the kind of meditation that we do, I will freely admit, I learned from Buddhism.
Or the noise, or the sensation. Let it arise, and then let it fall away again of its own accord.
At the Green Gulch Zen Monastery, a few miles north of San Francisco, Rabbi Alan Liu and Zen Roshi Norman Fisher conduct workshops entitled Translating Judaism, Translating Buddhism. The workshops explore how Judaism and Buddhism can complement and enrich one another when they are studied and practiced together.
Judaism was most alive for me in the prayer and the melody of it. There was questions and things that I needed answers for that I wasn't quite getting to in Judaism. You know, I remember once hearing that the reason why it felt like a lot of Jewish practice felt depressed, didn't have the aliveness that was there, was that Jews were depressed and angry at God for the Holocaust. And something in that resonated for me. That was something that we had to do in this generation that was different than what Jews had to do in other generations. And it seems that perhaps, you know, some of the other movement to other practices gave me some information to help me come back and resume this.
One of the things that I took away from the workshop at Green Gulch was Rabbi Lou was having us meditate on the Shema. The most important prayer in Judaism. It's so relevant to what we understand from Buddhism. I've incorporated the Shema into my sitting practice. So every time that I sit, I will say the Shema to myself. Listen, hear, Adonai is our God. Adonai is oneness.
Whenever God would speak to Abraham and say, "Hey, Abraham, are you there?" You know, and Abraham would always say, "Hineni, I am here." Always, he would always say that. It's like, I am awake, I am present, I am always present. And I think that is the goal. Zen, they use the word awake, but in Hebrew, in the Torah, I think, hineni.
It's one of the great pleasures I have now that I have a vocabulary of Dharma, to be able to use that vocabulary and say, look, it says that in Psalms, and it says that in Scripture, and look, it's been here all the time. And look, this Rebbe said it, and that Rebbe said it, and to be able to now re-express the Dharma in Jewish terms.
In fact, Jewish history is full of us, as well as those who are the naysayers and the boundary drawers. It seems to be full of people who are willing to interact with the culture around them. I think there's going to be a large percentage of us who are, quote, lost, in the sense that we will be attracted to Buddhism and find no particular reason to bring it back home. And I think there'll be a smaller percentage of people who, in fact, will incorporate it. And for that incorporation and that digestion and metabolism of these outside ideas, I think the Jewish body will be that much richer.
May she shine her face upon you and grant you paths of peace.
And man cannot live on bread alone. We need a purpose in life. And this is the thing which the East can perhaps provide for the West.